talk to Nick or me, it was something she would get fired for. She figured she could do more good where she was rather than at home with her kids. And Nick and I would keep our ears on the police radio, and I would stand in the living room like a walking dowsing rod, feeling with an outstretched hand which way Allie was going. It changed so often and so fast. This kept going well into November, and there would be calls from the station asking Nick to get back on the force, but he just hadn't answered. It was a dumb tactic, but it worked for now. Chances were it wouldn't work for long. They'd either get tired of asking and start telling, or they would figure out that he was up to no good. Nick didn't seem all that bothered though. For all bad things that one could say about Sheriff Mason, he and Nick were on good terms. And then came a day when Allie's movement stopped. It was sudden, and from what I could feel, not too far away. She was still moving around a little, but not nearly as far or as often. She wasn't dead. Something had changed and I didn't like it. Nick and I had prepared to face her and be done with this whole ordeal. But what were we going up against? And before we could figure out an answer, we got a call. It was a foggy Tuesday afternoon when Charlie called me. I had been shooting cans in the backyard when I heard the phone. I slumped down in a raggedy plastic chair and picked up, cracking open a lukewarm beer. "Yeah," I said. "I'm hearing some chatter on John Digman. I think the Duck are gonna make a move." So, if you don't want the Duck involved in this whole year-walker business, maybe you ought to pay him a visit first. Give him a heads up." "I don't give a shit about John Digman," I said. "Not after that stunt that he pulled at the Hatchet facility." "Look, I'm just telling you what I know. You play whatever cards you want." There was a slight pause as Charlie took a deep breath. I could hear her walking away, possibly locking herself in the bathroom. Maybe somebody was listening. "Besides," she continued, "it sounds like you won't be around for long anyway." And with that, I got a dial tone. I relayed my talk to Nick. He was just as skeptical as me, but we were getting into enemy of my enemy territory, and John Digman was an insider among insiders. We were worried about what we were getting up against, and I could only think of two people who might have an idea. One of those people would be John Digman. And with that, Nick and I went to see him. It wasn't a long drive, just a little past the downtown area, to an apartment complex on the outskirts of town. Not the fanciest place, but we had driven by there a couple of times on patrol. "Didn't we do a wellness check here once?" I asked Nick as I leaned against his car. "Isn't that what we're doing now?" He snarked back. "I suppose," I said, "but this feels a lot more casual." "Yeah," Nick nodded. "Casual. We're all chill and shit." Right." We walked past the reception and up the stairs. We had been given an address by Charlie. They had kept a close look on Digman for some time, but she had assured us that we would be in the clear for a couple of hours. They mostly checked him in the evenings, and this man didn't have a lot of evenings left. There was a small corridor leading to a shallow plywood door painted a bright pastel green. If a burglar wanted to get into this place, they could just punch their way through. This place was as secure as a tent. Still, they had to be doing something right. Maybe it was the landlord. They had quite a reputation around town. I knocked on Digman's door but didn't get a response. I looked over at Nick, who just shrugged at me. I knocked again. We waited a couple of minutes, whispering to one another in the meantime. "I can text Charlie," I said. "Maybe we got the wrong place." "Yeah, we should just go in," Nick said. "We can't just break the door and go." "Why not?" "We're not cops. What you're describing, Nick, is a home invasion." Sure." He barely needed to kick it in. A brisk shove with the shoulder was enough to break the whole thing wide open. The place was a mess. It looked like somebody had lived in that room for weeks, possibly months. Open takeout boxes paired with half-drunk soda and eroding paper cups. A smell of dying sugar and festering mold. I didn't even need to look around to know that there'd be cockroaches. Nick almost gagged. And before we got a chance to look around, we spotted him. He was in a chair by the window turned outward, away from the door. It was strange. From that angle, all he could see was the top of a tree. The rest was just sky. John Digman looked terrible. His skin was turning an actual gray and his hair looked metallic. His eyes were bloodshot and his breathing labored. The first thing that I thought of when I saw him was some kind of horror store mannequin. It didn't make sense that a man like that could still be alive. Nick couldn't keep a straight face. For all his disgust and mistrust of John Digman, I could tell that he hated seeing him like this. These two had met on more than one occasion. They probably knew each other pretty well, all things considered. Nick walked up to him, leaning against the window. "Jesus, John," he said. "You look like shit." John didn't move his head. He turned his eyes upward. Even that took a tremendous amount of effort. "Screw you," he coughed. Some things never change, I guess." I faced John, who turned his gaze to me. There was something there, a spark of recognition. We had talked before back at the Hatchet facility. There was a tinge of something at the corner of his mouth. Was he happy to see me, or was he trying to say something? His eyes turned downward towards his hand. He blinked at me. The words just wouldn't come. I reached out and touched his hand. Little strings of metal protruded from his fingernails. Little strands of white protruded from mine. In a moment of understanding, that twitch in his mouth curled into a smile. "Figures," he whispered. I looked up at Nick. "Give us a minute." And Nick was more than happy to step outside for a bit. As I held John's cold hand, his eyes rolled back into his skull. Seconds later, mine did too. It's hard to explain the sensation of stepping away from yourself. It's like when you've been sitting down for so long that your body doesn't feel like a body anymore. It's just a vessel for something else. You detach. That's what I felt like. I was moving away from something that I didn't need. Away from that sensation. The world looked a whole lot different, and yet familiar. The world looked a bit darker with a tint of midnight blue. We were in the same apartment, but the windows were busted. Far in the distance, we could see a towering tree, reaching for the moon. I wasn't really me, and John wasn't really John. And yet, we were just as us as we would ever be. I hate to say it, but in that space, John was sort of handsome. His long hair was stripped of all metal-tinted gray, and his eyes were this warm, green-brownish mix. He looked 20 years younger. He looked like a kind of roadie at an underground punk concert, the kind who would share his bottle of water with you. "Oh, it's so much better out here," John sighed. "So quiet." He got out of his car, or what remained of it. It looked slightly different and a whole lot more disintegrated. The thing nearly fell apart as he got up. "I guess I'll be seeing more of this place soon enough," he continued. "It's that bad, huh?" I said. "Yeah." He leaned against the wall with a heavy sigh, rubbing his tired eyes. He put his hands in his pocket and talked out loud. "It's not an infection, really," he said. "It's more like a merger. But it's not just a thing, it's you. A different you. And there are so many of those. That doesn't make any kind of sense." "Well, there's this you," he said, pointing at me. "The one from this place. And then there's another one somewhere else. One that's on fire. One that's evolved in underwater caves. Another that's just a stringy, hungry animal." "I'm guessing that's the one that I got," I said. "I don't feel very on-fiery." Yeah, no. You would know if it was the fire one, he said. It's all like branches from a really long tree, or different heads of a hydra, but it's all just you. I thought back on the people that I had seen in the Hatchet facility, those who drank from the sprinklers. They weren't the same as me and Allie. Different branches, same tree, all just trying to come to light, to exist, to get away from whatever a hellhole had been. What about those who can't control themselves? I asked. Some just lose control, others just die. Nature doesn't care, and like it or not, this is nature, he said. Different natures trying to coexist in a system that never prepared to mix, but still nature. Sometimes it gets weird. Can we fix them? I asked. What, all of them? No, that's not realistic. And what about just one? He thought about it and then shrugged. I suppose, he said, but you gotta go pretty far out. I don't think you're ready for that. Maybe we could get a hold of the woman in the captain, I said. The one who fixed me. Holy shit, John laughed. You met Dawn, but I'm surprised she's still around. You know her. Oh, every place has one of those, he said. Sometimes it's just a kid in a blue sweater. Sometimes it's a woman in a caftan. I think one of them was just some guy named Tom. Every place has someone who cares for it, and when it falls to shit, they usually do too. He leaned out the broken window, poking away some of the remaining glass shards. It was a nice night out. Then again, it was hard to tell the time of day. It seemed to always be night here. There was this one place where Clark Gable ran for president, he said. Crazy shit. I think they had him on the $10 bill. Man lived to be 85. I joined him looking out the window. I wonder what that would have been like, I said. A whole other world. Oh, there's a lot of them, John nodded. And I got this strange feeling. About what? He took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. He closed his eyes for a couple of seconds. When he opened them, there was a sparkle that I hadn't seen before. A bit of life. Maybe there will be another place and another time, where two unlucky people figure this out again, he said. And maybe one of them will joke that there was once this one world where we elected a reality show host as president. You think so? It's way crazier than Clark Gable. Fair. He stepped away from the window and there was a faint blue glow to his eyes. Something had changed. You ought to go back, he said. I'll see about that thing. What thing? Helping someone, he said. Just one, all right. I nodded and stepped away from the window. All right, I said. Let's go back. No, he said, shaking his head. Just you. I gasped as I pulled back. It was bright outside and the white strands in my fingers retracted. It felt like I had held my breath for a full minute. The air in me was stale and barren. And in front of me lay John Digman, dead. It was unceremonious and ugly. Nick had come back inside the moment that he heard me gasp. The two of us just stood there for a moment. And Digman had been a part of our world since the moment that I came to Tomskog. And with his death came this passing of the torch. I just couldn't fathom whom the torch had been passed to, or how. He said that he would help, I muttered. He said that. All right. Nick didn't question it. I was so thankful for that. For a moment, I just leaned my head against his shoulder. I couldn't help but to sob a little. He didn't say a thing. Maybe John was right. Maybe there would be another place with other people, figuring out the very same things. And maybe in that time and place, we would be the strange ones. The monsters. But right now we were just people, and maybe that was okay. There wasn't a lot that we could do. We had to leave him there, or the duck would get on our back within a day. We still had work to do. And Nick and I propped the door back up and left John behind. It was too late to do anything anyway. He had seemed like a practical man. He wouldn't have wanted us to risk anything for the sake of ceremony. Instead, we got back in the car and gave each other a tired look. "So what next?" Nick asked. "I say we go for it," I muttered. Just like that. He said that he would help. And Nick turned his attention to the road, nodding to himself. "All right," he said. "We'll go tonight." And we planned what we could. We had a heading and we had hunting rifles. There was no better way to time this, and there was no point in dragging it out. We were going to deal with Allie once and for all, and then we were heading to Dallas. We turned our phone off and left them at Nick's place. There was no way to tell what or who we'd encounter, and we didn't want anybody to track us. This was off the grid as much as it was off the record. Nick had got us masks, gloves, and a set of spare clothes to change into. In fact, he was ready to leave town at the drop of a hat. If everything went to plan, we were heading for Dallas in the morning. Packing everything into his car, we set off just before midnight. On the way there, Nick put on the radio, just background noise to drown out the most worrisome thoughts. We had gone from law enforcement to vigilante, and now we were closing in on being downright assassins. It turned my stomach. I wondered if my mother would have accepted me like this. "What are you gonna do in Dallas?" Nick asked. Maybe he just wanted to break the silence. I wouldn't have put it past him. Probably get a small place somewhere, and maybe work retail," I said. "Retail?" Nick frowned. "You okay to work with people like that?" "We work with people all the time, Nick." "Yeah, but we usually got handcuffs." Maybe I'll do something with handcuffs then." Nick snorted. The radio host prattled on about God knows what, laughing to themselves. Just like us. We turned onto a dirt road leading up onto a hill and into the pines. We weren't that far from the Hatchet facility distance-wise. There was a lot of uncomfortable terrain in between, but a bird could probably get there in 20 to 30 minutes flat. A thought crossed my mind. Maybe Allie was going back. Making our way upwards, we left the car far behind. There were no trails, so we had to make our way through the underbrush. The November wind was picking up. Nick muttered something about rain, and I could feel the sting of a chill. It was going to be a long night. As we had reached the top of a hill, the ground evened out. Moving between the pine trees, we found an opening. Looking out, we could tell that we were in the right place. It was a small valley hidden in the middle of nowhere. The ground was covered in blue sunflowers and small handmade wooden structures. Huts more like, just a handful. "Is this it?" Nick whispered. "Yeah," I said. "She's here." I could feel it. That little part of me calling out to me, telling me to join with the others. Allie was there and she felt different, clearer, calmer. We positioned ourselves on the top of the hill, using the scopes of our rifles as binoculars. We could see people moving about, a handful at most. Most wore these strange hand-carved masks. One guy had a plastic cutting board as a mask. Reaching out towards them, I felt something but different. They weren't like me or Allie, but there was something there, a seed. We watched them for about an hour or so. We could see them moving between buildings. We counted them, giving them names like Spiky and Limpy. We counted 6 of them moving about, with another 6 or 8 either resting or staying inside, but none of them looked like Allie. Maybe we ought to just start popping them, said Nick. Flush her out. Unless she disappears again, I said. I say we wait. For what? For whatever. Well, that's a shit plan, Nick said. You're a shit planner. We're still doing it, I added. I'm not missing this chance. Nick shook his head and turned his attention back to the scope. He didn't like it, but he wasn't about to let me do this on my own. Stupid or not, it was better to be stupid together. We stayed there for 2 hours before we saw commotion. Someone was running through the field. I barely registered the movement at all. I heard it before I saw it. People were laughing and screaming, like it was a big game. Steadying my rifle against a rock, I got a closer look. Perry Digman, the yearwalker. They had captured him. They had kept him there. That's why Allie was drawn out and why she was around. They're gonna kill him, I said. We gotta pick them off. They're not killing him, said Nick. If they wanted to, they would have. She's down there somewhere, right? Right. So why hasn't she killed him then? It was a good question. The thought crossed my mind that maybe whoever had killed the yearwalker might have to take their place. If that was the case, it'd be in their best interest to keep them around until the end of the year. Or maybe they were fattening him up like a pig. I had no idea. They got their reasons, I sighed. Probably. There was a snap of a twig, somewhere close. I repressed my instinct to move. Instead, I kept my head down and I listened. There were footsteps all around us, and they weren't trying to hide it. They were clumsy, stumbling through the forest like a newborn deer. I peeked over at Nick, holding up a finger to my lips. He nodded. A couple of people walked past. They were barely upright. Some of them didn't have shoes on. Others were barely dressed to be outside. As one became 8, I started to recognize a couple of them. I had seen them back at the facility. They weren't paying much attention, and within a few minutes, they had passed us by. I tried to keep myself from holding my breath, instead forcing air into my lungs at a steady pace. The last thing that you want is for a sudden exhale to give you away. But then the last stranger passed us by, and that was someone far more familiar to me. She was dressed in a gray hoodie and had this black pixie-like haircut. Elizabeth Salinger. How the hell had she made it here and why? I knew it was a dead giveaway, but I couldn't keep my eyes off of her. Her out of all people. Before I could figure out an answer, her head turned to me. Those piercing eyes cutting straight through the night and meeting mine. I felt like a rabbit being stared down by a lion, like she was about to do something violent at any second. Instead, she blinked at me. A little water poured out of her mouth as she gargled. She made a noise, this awful guttural grunt, like she was trying to swallow her own throat. And then she coughed up a glob of water and spoke.
Just one.
She gargled. And with that, she turned her attention away, leaving me to finish whatever business I had. Turning to Nick, my eyes were wide open. He kept looking at me and then back at her and then back at me again. I shook my head at him. Just one. After that, hell broke loose. We saw Perry Digman get a hold of a rock and chase off his attackers as they closed in on him. They clearly weren't trying to kill him. They were either toying with him or trying to capture him. Either way, they were about to get some company. Elizabeth and her sore-infected crowd were heading straight for them. I had no idea what was about to go down, but we had a different target in mind. Perry was already heading off straight into the woods on the opposite side. "She's not coming out," I said, "and shit's about to hit the fan." "Oh, what are you suggesting then?" Nick whispered. "We go down there," I said. "Stay low and I'll get a better idea of where she is, and then we finish it." "You up for that?" he asked. Of course I was. As Perry and the masked folks ran off, Nick and I got up. I'd help the kid if I could, but there was just no time. And yet I had this feeling that John was still around to help in some way. We made our way down the hill and into the field of sunflowers. As we moved around, we noticed poles with electronics attached to them. Old phones, speakers, radios. Anything that could produce a noise or an image. Some of them even worked. While I didn't understand it, a part of me seemed to enjoy it. There was a pit in my stomach that liked the noise of the in-between spaces, the static. It was comforting, not to me, but a part of me. There were still masked people running about. Nick and I stayed low and out of sight, hoping against hope that they wouldn't get too close to notice. I had pulled my mask up. It was strange. The sunflowers almost moved out of the way as we passed through, like they were inviting us to get closer. I didn't like it. Dry and dead things should rustle when you move past. They shouldn't bend out of their way. We moved past what looked like a root cellar where they had kept Perry. A nasty place, some kind of underground prison cell. Not much further ahead, I could see a log cabin. It was sort of hidden away by the pine trees and barely visible in the night, but I felt that it was the place to go. That's where she was. There was screaming in the distance. Nick turned his attention to my right, and before I could react, he stood up. He raised his rifle and without a second thought, he fired. That one shot rung out like a dinner bell. There had been a masked man creeping up on us from the side, and now the jig was up. We had gone loud, and it was now or never. Nick slapped me on the shoulder without lowering the rifle. He was telling me to go. I headed straight for the cabin as Nick reloaded and fired another shot. I could feel the trickle of rain. If we had stayed quiet a little longer, it would have masked our movement perfectly, but now it was too late. The door to the cabin flung open and a young woman in a green dress wielding a meat cleaver ran out. I aimed a shot at her leg and I pulled the trigger, sending her reeling into the dirt. All the fight ran out of her. She flung the meat cleaver to the side and crawled away, whimpering for me not to kill her. I hadn't intended to. I just reloaded and entered the cabin. It was a cozy enough place. 2 large rooms, a couple of carpets and a fireplace. A bed, some chairs, a table. It was quiet, and somehow that made it worse. Rounding the corner with my rifle raised, I saw a woman in a white dress. She was sitting with her back towards me, but I couldn't tell if it was Allie or not. It didn't look like her. Then again, there was no telling what might have happened to her these past few weeks. Months. But Allie had been rabid. This woman was sitting at a makeshift desk, putting pen to paper. She had a goose feather pen and an inkwell, for crying out loud. "Name?" I asked. "Oh, I'm sure you remember." I raised my rifle to shoot as she turned to me. My body froze. Her face was a tangled mess. It wasn't even a face anymore. It looked like a biologic mass, twisting and turning, competing to stay on top like a bucket of eels. The smoothness of bone gave way to the fibers of muscle. Her head looked more like a struggling bag, trying to contain a broken memory of a body. I was so mesmerized that I couldn't understand what I was looking at. The voice wasn't really coming from her, it was coming from that pit in my stomach, and the many screens and radios in the fields around us. There was even a walkie-talkie on the radio, and it was coming from there too. "Sorry about last time," she said. "It's been hectic." "So it is you. You're Allie." "In a manner of speaking," she explained. "But I become so many other things, so many other people. But I am what I am, yes. Good enough for me." Rifle raised, I squinted. I looked past the scope and into the iron sights. She wasn't moving, not throwing herself on the ground. No pleading, no begging. Instead, that swirling mass just looked at me. For a split second, I doubted myself. Maybe I ought to aim for her heart, her stomach. No, headshot. The moment that I squeezed the trigger and the heartbeat before the bullet had pierced her skull. A single sound echoed in the cabin. Yes! She was excited, eager, like she had been waiting for something like this to happen. Blood spurted out of the back of her head, and the whirling mess in her face unfurled on the floor like an exploding flower, leaving only an empty sack of skin behind. It suddenly dawned on me what it reminded me of. That ungodly tree in the other world. That thing that reached towards the sky. An unnatural skin construction. An amalgamation. Just to be sure, I put a couple more bullets in her. Her heart, her lungs, 2 more in the stomach. It was strange though. Looking at where she had sat, there was nothing there. What had she been writing on? The door burst open. There was a knock on the wall as to alert me to their presence. Not just anybody would do that. I knew that it was Nick before he rounded the corner. "We gotta go," Nick said. "There's more. A lot more." "Got it," I said. "We're done." The word hung in the air as time slowed to a halt. The forest grew darker, the clouds parted, and an impossibly large full moon loomed overhead. The roof of the cabin was gone, long since rotten away. I had been taken there into that space, into the other place where John and I had spoken, where a distant flesh tree reached for the moon. I didn't have a rifle. I saw a vague shadow of Nick as he faded out, leaving me alone with another person. Allie. She looked like herself in here. Calm, collected, calculated, friendly even. Something was screaming at me to run, and I was having a hard time arguing against it. And something else told me that it was a bad idea. She'd be faster and deadlier. "I figured something like this might happen," Allie said. "That's why I let that thing take my place to begin with." I turned to her. She was just a few feet away, as if she never left that writing desk. She was still there, but this time it wasn't empty. She was making notes as she read a basic leather-bound book called The Diary of Emmett Rask. Once you start to make sense of these places, there's really no limit to where you can go or what you can do, she said. Prop up a little straw doll to take your place and you can work in peace. "Well, then I'll kill you here," I said. "Ever thought of that?" She raised an eyebrow at me and smiled. "I'm so thankful that I met you," she said. "You've enriched my life immensely." She said something else. It wasn't really a word as much as it was an intention, but these images flashed before me. But not really images, more like memories. Things that I had lived and experienced in other places. It was me, but another me. In one place there was fire, strange markings in the sky. I was being forced to the ground by masked creatures and speared with iron rods. They weren't killing me. They were pinning me to the ground to be consumed later, like skewering a worm on a hook. She never even asked for it. They just wanted to please her. In another place, I was dressed in a traditional cotton dress and dragged into a lake to drown. They had lied to me, telling me that it was for the good of the village, but it wasn't. It was for the good of her. And all the while, she just stood at the bank of the lake, looking blameless. I was in water but breathing. Something in the dark grabbed me by the neck, like they had done when I was a pup. But they dragged me to the forbidden deep, like she had demanded. I was to be eaten. A will to live can only get you so far. Teeth was the real force of nature. And it wouldn't stop. 1,000 places, 1,000 selves. The numbness of space, the searing heat of fire, the rot of acid. Volcanoes, lightning storms, trampled, cut, burned, sliced, starved, and crushed, One by one, they all gave way to her demands. A parade of deaths happening at her command, the heiress of something that I could barely understand. And then it was just me, the end of the line, the final one. And I was just standing there in front of her, struggling to remember my body. She had gotten up from her desk and taken off her reading glasses. "I can't think of another way to consume you," she said. "What can I even do that hasn't already been done?" I couldn't answer. I couldn't speak. So many of me had never had lungs or mouths. Some had barely been born. I was having trouble finding myself and what I could do. My mind was reeling. Her hand crept closer. She reached for me. A touch. That'd be all it took. "I'll have to improvise," she said. "It'll be fun." Oblivion at her fingertips, somehow, somewhen. And none of me had been able to do anything, anywhere. What was I supposed to say? But then my jaw ached. It moved. Little white strands pushed themselves out of my mouth. They touched her hand, burning it, wrapping itself around her arm. She pulled back, but it wouldn't let go. Finally, she pulled with all her might. I had tried pulling on those strands before, but it had clung to my innards like an animal. This time it did nothing. There was no resistance. It let itself get pulled out, and like a clogged drain, the infection was ripped out of me. A mass of swirling white tendrils collapsed on top of Allie, burning her like a frenzied jellyfish. I understood. I had won over that thing inside fair and square, and this was my prize. It was giving me time. Even if it destroyed her in the here and now, this was temporary at best. But without the sore infection in me, she couldn't pull me back into this place. She would have to find her way back to my world, to my place, and that was not going to be easy. Allie screamed as her flesh sizzled and burned. She struggled as her fingers turned to bone and her nerves failed her. She collapsed to the floor. I wanted to say something, but it would be useless. That thing in a way was me, another me, and just like countless others, it was going to die. It had already started to wither, the little white strands twitching as the primitive nerves begun to die. It was already fading, but I was going to live. I turned to run, and the moment I did, I tripped, landing face first into a field of dry blue sunflowers. I was out. Real. It was so disorienting, but I could feel myself moving. I couldn't stop. Nick pulled me up to my feet. "Come on," he yelled. "Don't weird out on me now. We're going to Dallas, goddammit." "Dallas, right." I coughed and something felt odd. I was lighter, empty. I even sounded differently. Had this thing been poking at my voice? We made our way back up the hill. The masked ones were freaking out, tearing their hair out and running screaming into the woods. One of them set the cabin on fire and then themselves. It wouldn't last for long in the rain, but it managed to collapse the roof. By the time that we got back to Nick's car and slammed the door shut, I was soaking wet and ice cold. Nick was no better off. He dumped the hunting rifles into the back of the car and started it up. As he put the gear in reverse, I couldn't help but let out a cry. Nick had his hand on the parking brake, but he stopped himself. There was this deep sadness in me that I couldn't explain. Just touching upon the memories of those different places and ends, it made my heart ache. It wasn't fair. Was it all my fault? I couldn't help but to cry. Nick put a hand on my shoulder, giving me some time to collect myself. "Let's just go," I said. "Let's go to Dallas." "Are we done?" he asked. "I don't know," I bawled. "I don't know, and I'll never know. This is too much, Nick. It's beyond what I can do, what anyone can do." "So we're not done," he sighed. "That's what you're telling me." I threw my hands up in surrender. How could you fight something like Allie, the blameless woman? Nick turned the ignition off, leaving us both in the dark. He took his hands off the wheel and looked straight ahead. We sat there for a couple of minutes as he stroked my shoulder with his thumb. I don't think she can die, I said. It's impossible. So why not just go? Why not just go to Dallas? Oh, because we said one more thing, Nick said. We said this one last thing and then Dallas. That was the deal. I'm not one to break a deal. But it'll never be just one last thing, I cried. She won't stop, not here, not anywhere, not when, not how. I don't know, Nick. Well, then we'll figure it out. He spat back. We figure it out and then we deal with it. He put the car in reverse, turned around, and started driving us back down the dirt road. As he did, he tried to say something, but the radio distracted him. He turned it off with a groan. I don't want to date you, he said. I don't want to bang you, and I don't want to have some kind of asexual, not relationship, but kind of thing going. We're not like that. I didn't say anything, I let him go off. He clearly had something on his mind. I don't have a lot of friends, he said. Hell, my brother and I are like what, second cousins? I mean, we're not, but we're like that, you know. He laughed as he took a turn a little too harshly. I don't even know his birthday, Nick laughed, and he doesn't know mine. All these people, they're people. Off in the distance, somewhere over there, you know. But you're here. You're with me. You don't give a shit about the little things and you look past the shit. You know how rarely I get that. How rarely I get someone in my life who gives a shit. He held up a finger. I got that once. One time. And we all know what she did. He continued. But you're not like that. You're not running off unless we agree on it. We're partners, real partners, and that's gotta mean something. Nick, you don't have to. No, forget that, he said. This isn't just your deal anymore, it's our deal. And I don't care if it's not possible, we're gonna do it anyway. He slammed his foot on the brake, sliding to the side of the road. He turned to me with a deep sigh. We do this thing and then we're heading to Dallas, he said. Or are you running off? I leaned back in my seat, feeling the unease swirl in me. The pictures of the many ends that I could, would, and had faced. But Nick wasn't looking at that. He was looking at his start. And I didn't have a whole lot of those to treasure. I turned to him, wiping away a tear. Nick opened the driver's side window, letting in some fresh air. No, Nick, I said. I'm not running. He nodded at me and took off his pink sunglasses. With a flick of the wrist, he tossed them out the window. I bet they're still there today, waiting by the side of a dirt road in rural Minnesota. And with that, we sped into the night. It was better to be stupid together.